Hey folks, this is LA Progressive Dick and Sharon back with you again. And once again, back with us is our dear friend Peter Laarman, a longtime minister, but deep activist who in retirement is way into activism. Unfortunately, he moved to the opposite coast, but we get to see him here. So what we want to talk about is you wrote a new article called Gods and Monsters. Could this be the
Christofascism.
Christofascism's Annunciation moment? How you doing, Peter?
Yeah, hi. You could say crypto-fascist and
I
Christo-fascist, and you'd be
know.
right. You'd be right on both counts. Yes, I haven't written for LA Progressive for a while, but I wanted to write this for you, and I wanted to begin with a mild critique of why is it that in the New York Times, which apparently employs 1 out of 7 professional journalists in the United States currently working, um, they have 4 columnists, all of whom uh, declare themselves to be Christian in one fashion or another. And then they have, religion reporters. But the columnists, the opinionators, as I call them, ought to do their homework about what they're talking about. And so a particular columnist named David French talked about the eclipse or the end of the Christian right being replaced by religious the religious right, lowercase, and the whole thing is sourced from one buddy of his who wrote in an evangelical journal about this framing. And I just think the framing is wrong because I think that the old Christian right of the beginning in the mid 70s, but through the 80s and 90s, and this new formation are, they're forgive me, blood brothers. They're joined at the hip. It's one continuous thing. It is more vicious now, and I try to explain the and describe the added viciousness. But the old crowd weren't unvicious. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, well, tell us. So the old crowd was vicious on the persecution of gays and women's rights, and how is that different today?
Okay, so let's name some of these people. Everybody, well, not everybody, because it's been a while, remembers Jerry Falwell and the moral majority and the focus on the family. That was Robertson's thing, and James Dobson's Family Research Council, and there were others, overwhelmingly white men who commanded very, very large audiences and who were deeply alarmed, for example, about the scandal in the Oval Office involving Monica Lewinsky. You remember that? And they even had a Christian conservative do the prosecution, a guy from out there where you are, Occidental College, I think. Not Occidental. What's the other one up there in Malibu?
In
Oh,
Malibu, Pepperdine?
Pepperdine. Yeah, Pepperdine. Kenneth somebody or other. Um, I'm a little fuzzy on that. But anyway, so they were pressing the immorality of leadership and the fact that a Christian country, and they always claimed this was a Christian country, should not be tolerating abortion, same-sex marriage. The whole gay movement was a big bugbear for them, and all of that. Um, Over time, they became eclipsed a little bit, but that virulence, that contempt for people whom they judge to be unrighteous according to their reading of Christianity, persisted. And throughout all of it, and this is something that David French doesn't address nearly enough, at the core is anti-Black racism because, and people forget this, and I can't say it often enough, the initial alarm that set this off was not, in fact, abortion. It was not Roe v. Wade in 1973. It was the fact that the government took away the tax exemption for Bob Jones University on account of its racism, on account of its segregation. And if you look at, where, for example, Jerry Falwell comes from in Lynchburg, Virginia, he's coming right out of that, Never Die, Stars and Bars, group. So yeah, and this group who are, blessing President Trump and his program, likewise have at the bottom a strong anti-black animus, which they don't pretend to hide. The difference, though, Dick, is the old group were hypocrites. That is to say, they love the expression, "We don't hate anybody; we hate sin."
Right.
Right? Um, we stand up for moral, ethical behavior based on gospel principles. This crowd seem not to care about that. I mean, obviously, if their idol, their leader is Donald Trump, a thief, a fraud, a rapist, shameless, um, grasping dominator. They can't really talk about character anymore. That's gone, right? And any amount of cruelty seems to be okay. It's almost as though Christ commands us not simply to state our own principles, but Christ commands us to penalize, and I mean threaten the lives of immigrants and trans people and on, right? It's explicitly violent. That's why I use the term fascist, which I don't use lightly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. I love your use of alliteration. You call it the sanctimony society, the old Christian rite. And you also call them the pious pangendrums.
Pangendrum.
Pronounce that word for me. That's a new one for me. I'm going to add it to the LA Progressive Glossary, which, by the way, for people who are listening, if you go to laprogressive.com and look at our menu, you see that we have quite an extensive glossary. And the reason that we have it partly is because of writers like Peter. So, Peter, tell us.
I'm not trying to be pretentious. I like words that are, that's a particular, a pangendrum is a, I'll use another fancy word, a martinet, a person who's, commanding, creating order, taking charge, a pangendrum. I don't even know what the origin is.
Well, this sanctimony society, I love that you bring in anti-Blackness, because that's really at the root of this division between the white supremacist nationalists, Christian nationalists, and the other Christians, the Black church. But there still are some problems on the other side as well. You want to talk a little bit about why we're not hearing more from the church about, these people that parade around as if they're the face of Christianity. They're nothing like what Jesus Christ was about.
Right. Well, at the very top of my piece for LA Progressive, I somewhat mischievously say, gee, the New York Times has all these Christian opinionators, but they don't have a progressive Christian one because apparently they've never heard of progressive Christianity. So there is this counter narrative, very strong in the Black church historically for all kinds of reasons we can go into, but also parts of the white churches that have consistently said the only Jesus we recognize is the Jesus who healed the sick, who reached out to the poor, who identified with the poor, who demonized wealth, who said, "Woe unto you who are wealthy," right? Who clearly positioned himself against the values of the Roman Empire and against the values of their puppet regime at the time in the province of Judea, the Roman province of Judea. That's the Jesus who was crucified, and he was crucified for being basically a troublemaker. They don't crucify people for having theological disagreements. They crucify people who threaten the state. Mm-hmm. When he, at the end of his life, when he overthrew those temples in the outer courtyard of the Jerusalem temple, and he said, "You cannot make," quoting Jeremiah, "you cannot make God's house a house of thieves." He was upsetting the banking system, so he was upsetting the power basis of that puppet regime. That meant he had to go, and Rome didn't want any part of this anyway because he clearly set himself against at the time the Emperor Augustus, who thought he was God, right, and whom the Romans called God. I'm going off the deep end.
I love the deep end.
But now, what I want to say about African American Christians, because of the strong identification of Black people in this country with the Exodus narrative and with the Jesus who, in fact, walks with the oppressed. There's never been any kind of embrace in the Black church, or at least until very recently, of this idea that America is somehow exempt from God's judgment, is specially blessed, that the whole project of American imperialism is somehow part of the divine plan. If it weren't for the witness of Black Christians, I think the entire Christian project in the United States would have been down the toilet a long time ago. Dr. King used to say that it broke his heart that the white Christians, the letter from the Birmingham jail, that the white Christians couldn't see how much is at stake in making sure that everybody belongs, that everybody is free, and that we do something about this caste system. He didn't use the term caste, but that's clearly what he was talking about.
So how you call these people peace and justice Christians, people who are like your fellow Unitarians there in Providence and ours out here, who are trying to follow the teachings of Christ more closely, rather than this perversion of religion that gets foisted on us currently by all the people around Trump. So how do those peace and justice Christians, the white ones, how do they get in line and stand up?
Well, first of all, we need, and I'm part of an effort to begin to do this. We need to find each other and talk to each other. We need to find our people, as they say, and create a platform that's bigger than each little fragment or each separate project. And I can imagine some very effective memes, that riff a little bit about, find the Christian in this list of activities, right? And then we mix it up. It needs to be a little bit provocative at the same time that it's respectful. And there are people who are theologically to the right of me, whom I would trust with my life. I don't particularly think the traditional atonement theology, blood sacrifice, is particularly valuable. I don't even think it's how Jesus and his disciples saw what was happening, but it's the dominant mode. Plenty of those people are ready to move because it truly gets to them that we're deporting people without due process. It truly gets to them that people are knocking on doors with no identification and sweeping people away. It also truly gets to them that they're charitable organizations, and there are a lot of conservative Christians in charitable or moderate Christians in charitable organizations. They're getting their supply of food, their capacity to operate is being removed. So in effect, their religious liberty is under attack at this point. But Dick, this desperate times call for desperate measures. All these little groups kind of know each other, but they've never gotten together to say we need to stand up united, and not. It's not particularly useful to condemn the Christofascists, but to affirm this is our Christianity. Our Christianity is about solidarity. Our Christianity is about belonging. Our Christianity is about healing. Our Christianity is about lifting up the people Jesus called the least of these. And again, you get these right wingers. They don't actually pay attention to anything that Jesus did. The parable of the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, the woman at the well. Jesus meets the woman at the well. It's like, everybody calls you a sinner. What am I supposed to do? She's like, well, I'm not keeping a secret about my life. And Jesus is like, okay, you're fine. Go ahead. Right. Also foreigners, very interesting, because Jesus was in a Jewish community. Foreigners were completely welcome to him, and his own people, his own followers are like, "What do you do? Why are you healing these Romans for? What are you doing? You're mixing it up with Samaritans. We don't like those people. Those aren't our people." He's like, "What? Everybody's my people. Learn from me." Anyway, I'm preaching to the choir here.
Well, I'm sorry, you're not just preaching to the choir, because there are people that will see this video and will, I hope, have a different take on the kind of Christianity that we are always seeing on major media. These people that call themselves the Christian nationalists, which I think that those two terms it's an oxymoron. Those two words don't belong together.
So I hope people will actually read Peter's writing, because he's a beautiful writer. So read the article in addition to listening to our dulcet tones. I mean, it's really a good article, as always.
As always. Thank you so much, Peter, for enlightening us and broadening our perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you. I relish the opportunity to be in conversation with you always.
Take care. Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below, and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.